Good morning. I'm Fred Kemp, President and CEO of the Atlantic Council. I'd like to welcome our in-person studio audience in our Washington headquarters, and those of you who are watching virtually for this special edition of Atlantic Council Front Page, which is our premier platform for global leaders, featuring today His Excellency Irfaan Ali, President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. Mr. President, welcome to the Atlantic Council, and thank you for joining us in what's now your second visit here to the Atlantic Council. I'd also like to acknowledge Executive Vice Chair of the Atlantic Council, Adrian Arsht, and Board Member Melanie Chen, who are both with us today. President Ali's visit to Washington, D.C. comes at a critical moment for global affairs. The world is grappling with challenges on several fronts. The cost of food, energy, and finance is rising. The frequency and intensity of climate-related disasters increases each day. Geopolitical tensions are playing out in international arenas, and few regions are as affected by these challenges as the small states in the Caribbean region, including Guyana. President Ali's vision and leadership over these past few years have helped Guyana navigate these challenges and capitalize on its booming energy sector. No country in the world, let me repeat that, no country in the world is growing at the rate that Guyana is. Last year, Guyana's economy grew by 62% and is expected to grow at an additional 38% based on the country's vast oil and gas reserves. With increased wealth has come the challenge of shouldering more responsibility, something that President Ali has shown while in office. His government has taken the lead on strengthening food security for the Caribbean and has carried out a historic carbon credit sale worth $750 million to support the preservation of its forests. Now, with the seat on the UN Security Council, Guyana's leadership is coming to the global stage. And at a global organization like the Atlantic Council, we are honored to welcome him back to our headquarters and have President Ali share his vision with us. We'll hear from him on how Guyana is emerging as a global leader, including his thoughts on his plans for COP28, where the Atlantic Council will be in full force, outcomes of the BRICS and G20 summits, and much more. We're also excited to have with us Zeba Warsi, Foreign Affairs producer at PBS NewsHour. She will moderate a conversation with President Ali later in the program. But first, it's my honor to invite President Ali to the podium to give some keynote remarks. And President Ali, it's wonderful to have you here, and I look forward to hearing your regional and global vision.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, allow me to thank all of you for your presence here and your continued support towards Guyana, your interest in Guyana, and the way in which we are shaping the future of the country, but not only the future of the country in an isolated position, the future of the country in the context of regional and global development. We see ourselves as part of the extensive global community in which we must be able to shape conversation, shape the development of ideas, and work towards a vision in which Guyana must be an important forum and an important part on three very critical issues. And the three critical issues that we want to position Guyana as a champion and as a leader are, one, the food security, issues surrounding food security, issues surrounding energy security, and climate security. Those are three of the most challenging issues the world is facing today. And when you speak about security and defense, and when you speak about disputes and so on, these three issues are paramount to all of this. We see a lot of emphasis placed on, rightfully so, on the war in Ukraine. But the consequences of the war, there is not much telling of the fallout, the consequences that war has brought, especially on small developing states. The level of inflation in the region that is as a direct result of the war in Ukraine, the issue of transport logistics during COVID and out of COVID, and how that has influenced the rising cost of living and the issue of inflation in the region, but more importantly, in small developing states. And these are key issues that sometimes miss the agenda of global policymakers, because we're spending so much time, rightfully, on trying to find a resolution to the war in Ukraine, that we are not investing the same analysis in the consequence of this war on other economies. So the world is faced in a very complex situation now, where we have the food crisis, the energy crisis, and the climate crisis on us at once. COP28, there's a lot of talk on what may be the outcome of COP28, but there are some fundamental issues that we should sort out even before getting to COP28. Take, for example, the issue of adaptation. We have not have a common position on that. We have not sorted out the issue on the development pledge, the $100 billion pledge. So we are going into COP28 with so many unresolved issues. We have not sorted out the issue of having the most affected countries in climate change, especially in the CARICOM region, on the boards of financial institutions, so that their interests can be better represented. We have not sorted out issues in relation to loss and damage. We have not sorted out issues on the carbon market. How are we going to develop a mature carbon market, one that is structured, especially for carbon from the forests, and ensuring that that is not a voluntary market, but a very structured market. So we head into COP28 as one example with so many unresolved issues, with so many questions. And one of the things that we have been championing from Guyana is even a restructuring of the approach to COP. You go to COP, the leaders speak up front and they leave. And then the technical team is there to do the negotiations, and then there is no one to break deadlock at the end. So we were arguing that the structure of COP should have changed, where the leaders come at the end after the negotiations and to break deadlock and to play a more analytical and meaningful role in finding the solutions, and not just giving the statement, the country statement, making more pledges and commitment, and then head back on the next flight. So I believe that we need to examine the structure of COP and what outcome we would like, but there are some very focused areas that Guyana is going to zero in on. And we are pursuing a development path, the Low Carbon Development Strategy 2030, in which we have decided, as a matter of policy, that our forests, which is the size of England and Scotland combined, storing 19.5 gigatons of carbon, with the lowest deforestation rate in the world, completely R3 certified and accredited, high-quality carbon, that we are going to use this platform to champion the cause of forested countries. So the Commonwealth has just established a team that will be led by Guyana and Gabon to pursue issues of the forests and the carbon market from the forests, and to have this back on central stage. You know, we had to fight to get forests on the agenda, to recognize that forest is part of the equation in the fight against climate change. And now we have to take that a bit further. So that is one of the things that we are going to pay a lot of attention to. On the issue of food security, in the region we have responsibility for food security in agriculture, that is in CARICOM, and we have established a goal of reducing our food import in the region by 25% by 2025. We have outlined a clear policy agenda. One of the difficulties, of course, is resolving trade barriers within the region itself so that you can have more interregional trade. Guyana is located in a very special place geographically. We have Brazil as a neighbor, one of the strongest supplier of food globally. And we are working now on creating a food hub in Guyana itself so that we can become a major producer and processor of food, not only for the regional market, but also for the global market. So we are working closely with countries from the Middle East to support the technological transfer, but also to support the development of new markets for the food that we can produce. And on energy, of course, the Guyana energy story is well known now, not only in the petroleum industry, but we are trying to position Guyana as an important hub for regional energy security. Very soon, we are hoping to have our national gas strategy ready, because many people are speaking now about the petroleum component. And that too, we are leading conversations globally on ensuring that there is a balanced discourse on the issue of the role of oil and the role of gas in transitioning to net zero. Because we believe that any conversation on this matter that locks out the producers of oil or investors in gas is not a balanced conversation, and not a conversation that can result in the type of policy formulation that is necessary. And we are championing this, and we have the credentials to champion it, because on the environmental side and on the oil and gas side, we are strong in both areas. So we are now working on positioning Guyana as an important regional energy security hub. So those are the things that our policy formulation is based on. But importantly, we also want to focus on Guyana's economy 2030 and beyond. And you just heard about the growth rate in Guyana. One of the important facets of that growth, though, is if you look at the first half of this year, we grew by more than 56%. And the composition of that growth, the non-oil sector, grew by 12.5%. The construction sector is growing by 44%. So the economy is broadening, and that is what we want. We are investing heavily in the infrastructure to strengthen other sectors within the economy, to make them more competitive, to ensure that our economy is well diversified, but also to build a country that is resilient, sustainable, and highly competitive in a world 2030 and beyond. A world that will be very complex and very different from the place we know today. The role of digitization, the role of AI, the role of robotics, these are all things that are critical to the type of policy formulation that we are working on. And we understand that we cannot do this in a straight line manner. We cannot get to where we want to position Guyana in a world 2030 and beyond that will be competitive if we work in a normal course, in a straight line manner. So we have to adopt the best and most relevant technology available today, now, and then work backwards in bringing the population up to speed to meet that to meet that new environment that would ensure our sustainability, our resilience, and our competitiveness. So these are the type of things that are influencing us and moving us into a position in which we believe that we can make a significant regional and global contribution. So those will be some brief opening remarks that I would want to leave with you, and to say to you that we are positioning our country in a place that we will be and must be around that leadership table globally on the issue of energy, food, and climate change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. I'm very excited for this conversation. I'm sure everybody else is. I think to begin with, we've read the numbers. You've just talked about them as well. But if we can just zoom in and you can tell us about how this translates into real change in the lives of Guyanese people.
Well, we can have this conversation on how it translates to real change in the life of Guyanese people all day. But let me give you some examples. We have decided that the revenue from oil and gas must be used to build an economy and a country that is not dependent on oil and gas. To do this, we have to have the relevant infrastructure and structure in our country to support all the other sectors, whether it's agriculture, natural resources, sector which includes mining, ecotourism, but more importantly, how do we ensure that we have one of the most skilled workforce, human resource base in the world, and how do we ensure that our healthcare system is second to none? So we have been investing heavily on healthcare and education. Our investment in these areas has increased tremendously, and we're already seeing the results. In healthcare, we're building a number of new hospitals across the different regions of the country. We want to ensure that our primary healthcare system is second to none. We are working with Mount Sinai as our partner in building out this healthcare system, not only to create an environment in which the people of Guyana will experience the best healthcare and education services, but also to ensure that that environment becomes an honor for the country also. So the eventual goal is to provide export services in the area of health and education. That is key for us. And the other area is how do we ensure that the development that is taking place is even, that is, does not widen inequality, and that all segments of the population benefits from this development. And when you look at the issue of housing, for example, that is a key area that empowers people. That is an area that increases net worth of families and communities. And we are investing heavily in a housing program that will see every single Guyanese owning their own home, that will see low-income families benefiting from cross-subsidization, that would give them a product that increases their net value, that give them access to loans that can immediately move them up the scale from low-income families to low middle-income and middle-income families. So we're doing this in a very targeted way, focusing on health, focusing on education, focusing on housing, focusing on ensuring that all our people have access to good education, to the extent that we're going to make university education free within the coming years. That is another goal. We have also established a scholarship program for young people. We are building out a national training center that would focus on all the skills, the technical skills that is required by the country and the economy, not only in oil and gas, but all the areas that we're developing. Because with gas coming on stream, there will be tremendous opportunities in manufacturing, industrial development, agro-processing, and these are the areas that we want to have our people well-trained and competent to function in. So that is another area in which you're seeing the benefit of the investment that we are making. The other thing is, how do we ensure that we fulfill the needs of Guyana and the region? One of the serious issues the world is facing today is the shortage of medical workers, especially nurses. So there is active recruitment in the region for our nurses and medical workers. So we recently announced a policy that any Guyanese with the qualifications to enter nursing that would like to do nursing, the government is going to finance that. We are building out more nursing schools. We're going to finance their education to become a nurse, and then we're going to employ them at the end of that in the system. The same thing for teachers. We have announced a national policy in which we're going to invest in having all our teachers becoming trained teachers and then trained graduates. All of this will impact positively the quality of education, the quality of healthcare, and raise the skill level of the people within the country. At the end of the day, one of the important things also is to support the enhancement of disposable income. And that is what is important for families. How do we create policies that enables families, especially the poorer families, to have more disposable income so that they can have a better quality of life? And that has to do with pensions, that has to do with the minimum wage, and all of these are issues that we are addressing within the confines of the fiscal space and managing in a proper way. And that is why 2 days ago, if you look at the IMF staff report in Guyana, it was a report that showed how our policies are bringing success. It spoke about the transparency, improvement in transparency and accountability, the framework that we're using to manage oil and gas, how that framework is positive, our improvement in dealing with anti-money laundering, our development strategy and the policies, how they're working in the interests of the people. It focused on the diversification in the economy, our credentials on climate change. And it's important for us to read that report because it gives that independent analysis as to how not only the policies are working, but how the policies are formulated in the interest of avoiding some of the historical challenges that oil and gas brings to countries like us, like ours.
Well, it does help that you do come with a strong background in people-oriented reforms. But zooming out, the war in Ukraine and other global conflicts have led to far-reaching geopolitical implications, particularly concerning your Caribbean neighbors and the wider global south. What role can Guyana play in bolstering food security and influencing the global energy market? And what is your vision of Guyana's leadership in these raging regional and international affairs?
You know, I was speaking to the Emir of Qatar. Only 2 days ago, he visited us. And we have a very good relationship. And he gave me an example when the sanctions were brought on Qatar. And I want to share this example with you. And of course, they were tempted to shut down the gas line because they were a major supplier of gas. But they were able to differentiate the commercial interests of the country, the economic interests of the country, from the political situation, and they kept the supply of gas. And we have seen the benefit of that for the country. They also were faced with a situation where they woke up one morning and there was no milk on the shelf. There was no cheese because of the sanction. And they built a dairy industry within 1 year that made them self-sufficient, and also now they're a net exporter of dairy and milk product. So the war in Ukraine has brought tremendous global challenges. One, on the supply of fertilizer. Two, the supply of grains. And grains is one of the most critical components in the food supply chain. Without grains, we can't have feed. Without feed, we can't have chickens. And that is the cycle. So what that war showed us was that and the war came after COVID. So the war justified what COVID taught us. COVID taught us that all this talk about globalization, when crisis hit the world, borders become closed. We forget about globalization. So when COVID came, what was the first response? We protect ourselves. All the nice talk about globalization and equitable distribution of global resources, people were dying and borders were closed. People were dying and there was protection for the supply of vaccines. We know because we went through it. We were told that, yeah, you're important, you will get the vaccine, but 5 years from now, we have other more important clients. So that taught us, and then we saw what the consequences were for transportation costs that drove up the cost for goods across the world, because the price for the movement of containers in some instances increased by over 1,000%, 1,500%. Consumers had to, and government had to manage that. We had to manage that. How do we ensure that we keep inflation in check, one, but at the same time ensure that we have a handle on cost of living issue. After that, the CARICOM region realized that we now have to move aggressively on self-sufficiency in terms of our food production, our transportation and logistics framework, and that has been the conversation around the world. How do we build self-sufficiency? And not in a country context, but from a regional context. So we have decided on a few things. One, in the region, Guyana must play a part in pharmaceuticals. Not only the manufacturing of pharmaceuticals and the production of vaccines, but also from the research and development end of things. We have a vast rainforest with tremendous potential in the pharmaceutical industry. So we are working in this economy 2030 and beyond, where innovation and research and development will be a key component of what we support. And that is the building out of a pharmaceutical industry from from research and development to production and the supply chain. Secondly, grains. We have decided that we are going to become self-sufficient in all the grain. So in 2020, we imported all the corn and soya we needed for the production of feed for our poultry sector. By 2025, we'll be completely self-sufficient because of a robust plan we developed in all the grains we need for our production of feed, corn and soya. And by 2027, we want to be able to supply the entire region with all the grain it requires in terms of corn and soya. And that is the type of investment we're making and contribution we're making. And then we have the third issue of fertilizer. With natural gas and what it can do, we now have the strong possibility of developing fertilizer plant, agrochemical, and facilities that would not only serve the needs of Guyana, but would serve the needs of the region and ensure that we are self-sufficient and not dependent on a system that becomes locked and insulated when crisis comes.
You touched upon this earlier in your remarks. With COP28 just around the corner, what does a country like Guyana expect? How does a country like Guyana expect to balance energy transition and energy security? What would be your message to participating countries in December?
Well, my first message is that we need to reshape the conversation. And I'm calling on all global leaders. This conversation is for policymakers and leaders to be at the table. The conversation is driven a lot by NGOs, and that is good. It's good that NGOs are involved. But the conversation has gone to a position now of where we have lost our balance. And I'm being very frank on this matter. If I ask today, what is the energy policy of the US in terms of petroleum product and gas, you will hear a policy. But then if you look at the action, you will see that there has been a lot of decisions taken in the last few months that support the protection of the US supply of gas and oil. You look at the license that has been issued. And then you see, for example, in Venezuela, that a license was issued to support the supply side. So we have to agree that oil and gas will play an important role in the transition and in achieving net zero. We cannot lock out the oil producers or the gas investors from the conversation, because both will play an important and key role in the transition. How do we get them to net zero? Is not about stopping oil production or stopping gas production. Net zero also involves the application of technology that would reduce the impact on the environment and give us more buffer on the issue of climate change. How do we get that conversation also on the front burner? What are the steps? How much money are these companies willing to put forward to invest in technology, to invest in systems, to invest in research and development that will minimize the impact? And that conversation is getting lost because it is this or nothing. It is net zero by this date or nothing. And we all know that all the commitments that the developed world and everyone is making, that we are not in any way close of reaching those commitments. I made a point recently. If you look at the CELAC region, we don't even have the funding gap to meet key SDGs by 2030, like sanitation, access to water, to quality water, energy security. We don't even have the resources to invest now to meet those SDGs. Who is financing the transition? Who is going to supply the energy need of the growing middle class of China and India? Those are the questions that are key to this conversation. Where is that supply for the increased demand is going to come from? Where is the replacement? How are financial institutions going to address the replacement the replacement cost for batteries for solar system? Where is the base load coming from for the developed world? So there are key questions that still need to be answered. So COP28, first of all, begins with us now agreeing to have a balanced conversation, agreeing to bring all the stakeholders around the table, agreeing to the tough discussions with each other, not against each other. We cannot achieve net zero if we're arguing against each other. We have to sit and confront the issues and come up with a menu of measures that would address this issue. Then we have the Climate Vulnerability Fund. We have the $100 billion pledge. We have the annual budget that is required for adaptation and mitigation funding. All of these, the gap in that funding in CLAC alone is $80 to $110 billion annually. Where is that financing coming from? So you're going to hear about commitments again, you're going to hear about pledges, but are we going to hear a report on what we have really achieved from the pledges? And I'm not speaking about the reformulation of existing loans and adding an environment component and mark that off against the pledge. So these are the key issues. How are we willing to deal with the writing off of debt and the debt burden that the developing world is faced? So the key issues are on the table, they are known, and we have the credentials to speak on it, because at the end of the day, long before we discovered oil and gas, we were securing a forest that served the world. We were protecting a forest that served the world. At what the world believed, a situation where that forest has no economic value, no financial value. All of this we have to change. How are we addressing the fact that the carbon market today, the anticipation was that carbon price should have been $70 US per ton. Where is it versus $70 US per ton? And those are the conversations that are the tough ones, but we are ready to confront. And we're going to be very vocal on this balanced approach and creating this balanced framework.
Guyana now holds a seat on the UN Security Council over the next 2 years. You've carved out your vision of how you see your country as an influential regional and international player. With the changing global dynamics, how do you and Guyana plan to navigate that, such as the recent announcement of the expansion of BRICS and the African Union joining the G20?
Well, first of all, we are a strong believer in multilateralism. And the African Union joining G20 is a welcome development, because the developing world, every space that the developing world is given to have our voices heard, to have our voices presented, our ideas presented, I think is a positive gain for the vast majority of people in our world. And what we are seeing is focus now, and let me back up by saying this. I made a point yesterday that if you look at the issue of competitiveness of economy and inequality, you would see that when the world went through the phase of modernization and mechanization, a lot of countries were left behind because they did not have the capital resources to build the technology and to modernize their traditional sector. So in the Caribbean, if you look at our agricultural sector that was heavily labor dependent, and with a lack of capital and technology to modernize, we became uncompetitive. Look at sugar, look at banana. That was a result of mechanization and modernization. It created a situation where some countries became more competitive than others because they had the resources to mechanize. Today, some of these countries are only now catching up with that disparity, and we have digitization coming. The new economies, the new structure of the economies, they have to now deal with that. So how is it we build a world that is fairer, and a world in which we can have the people of the world placed in front of policies? And if we have people in front of policies, we'll have more people-centered policy. And that is the exact role. And that is what we want to bring to the table on the Security Council. How do we build global prosperity? How do we build global prosperity while maintaining a peaceful environment? We have to also deal with the issue of Haiti. How are we going to get to a UN resolution on Haiti? Because many of this conversation takes place around Ukraine and all of this, and we forget Haiti. Haiti has been a longer problem than Ukraine. But all the commentators and all the analysis forget that Haiti exists. And sometimes we have to ask ourselves why. Why? We see tremendous effort globally on getting consensus on Ukraine. And we laud that because we are part of it. We are part of ensuring that every country must have peace and stability, and their territorial integrity must be defended. But we can also approach global problems based on an uneven hand. And frankly speaking, Haiti has not been getting the type of global attention that it deserves in this time of crisis. Look at the news coverage and check what percentage of news is dedicated to Haiti and what percentage is dedicated to the other issues we have globally. So how are we going to get a consensus, a UN resolution on Haiti? How are we going to get Canada, the UK, the US? Well, I think the US made an announcement yesterday on financing, at least the forest, contributing to financing in the first year. But how is Canada, the UK, France, how are they going to participate? What resources are they putting in? We see Kenya and Rwanda, both of them saying they're ready to support by putting human assets into Haiti. The effort to get to a UN resolution is as critical as the issue we are faced with in Haiti, in Ukraine. So we intend, as a small country, to ensure that the challenges of all of the world is represented. We intend to ensure that the issue of democracy, the issue of territorial integrity, that these are issues that we must champion, and we must support measures that seek to protect those who are being affected. But more importantly, the issue of global peace must be linked with global prosperity. And that conversation is a very broad conversation that we intend to provide some leadership on.
Well, I have many questions, but we are limited in time. But let me just wrap up by asking you, what can we expect from you and Guyana in 2024 and looking ahead to the turn of the decade? How do you expect the economy to change and your relations with the rest of the world to change?
What you can expect of Guyana is a responsible country in which we bring balance to our developmental aspiration with climate, energy, and food security. A country that will be strong in its democratic credentials, in the respect for rule of law. A country that works towards bringing an equitable, prosperous mode of operation and in its policy for the people of that country. A country that's moving ahead on a platform that will build out a healthcare and education sector that is second to none, and a country that will occupy more of the discussion space and the policy-making space globally, especially in the areas of climate, energy, and food. And a country that will remain steadfast in our commitment as a good global citizen, and one in which upholds the principle of multilateralism and support a pro-poor approach to growth and development.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. We are very thrilled and cheering on Guyana's impressive transformation, and we all wish you all the best.
Thank you for your very kind words, and thank you to the Center. You know, the Atlantic Council has been a strong advocate for Guyana too, and we want to thank all those who are playing such a key and important role in the development of our country and the advancement of a peaceful and prosperous world. Thank you.